UFC president Dana White, even Dana knew that, Francis Ngannou was going to lose to Anthony Joshua. And it was interesting to hear because you ultimately think about things like the politics of the sport. You think about the fact that, Dana White wants the best for his brand. He wants the best for MMA. And, he promoted Conor McGregor very well against Floyd Mayweather. He talked about the fact that this is the biggest fight in the world, and he obviously supported his fighter in that fight. But ultimately, we also infer that, Francis left the UFC ultimately to join the PFL, where he would ultimately, get the leverage he wanted and deserved. But Dana White talked about the fact that he kind of knew Francis was going to lose. And he said that if Tyson Fury didn't actually, underestimate Francis Ngannou, he probably would have done the same thing that Anthony Joshua did. I don't know about that, just because the power in general is different, and I think Francis Ngannou he's not a punching bag. Like, he's not just gonna go in there and take a dive. It's just he ran into one of the heaviest hitting heavyweights in the world, and in his territory in the sport of boxing. So I respect Francis Ngannou for taking that risk. I know that Anthony Joshua was very graceful and gracious in victory, and I respect him for that. After his win, he could have been saying, I told everybody, I told you, and then talking all this trash to Francis Ngannou, but he was actually encouraging him. He was telling him to keep his head up and saying don't leave boxing because you're talented. Ultimately, I think Francis looked good, and maybe this sounds crazy, but up until the point where he was getting dropped, he has a good stance. He has the good base for the fundamentals of the sport. It's just obviously you can't just stand in front of him, because I think Francis is so used to guys being not the best strikers in the world. When he fights guys in the UFC and MMA, he's going stand up. There's a threat of the takedown. There's leg kicks. Other strikes are allowed, but when it's just boxing, and you stand in front of a guy like Anthony Joshua, one of the best heavyweights in the world, and you think you're not going to get you're not going to get sniped with that right hand by standing straight in front of him. That's what I think Dana White's kind of referring to. I think Dana knows deep down, whenever a legitimate boxer fights a MMA fighter, or even one of his UFC fighters, they're gonna lose, because ultimately these guys train in this. This is all they do. All they do is box. When you're doing the UFC, when you're doing MMA, and you have your attention, some of it's invested in grappling, some of it's invested in striking, and then wrestling. So your attention is divided. In boxing, you have your undivided attention to strictly stand-ups, strictly to your fists, the left hand, the right hand, the right hook, the left hook, all these variety of combinations. It's all the same, as opposed to the UFC, where you have to kick, you have to throw elbows, learn how to grapple, do jiu-jitsu, all of that stuff. It takes, I'm not saying that one's easier than the other. It's all hard. We know that, but it's different. So ultimately, when a boxer gets in the boxing ring with an MMA fighter, the boxer is going to come out on top, and then you guys are going to bring up the instance of Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou. Dana White, the UFC president, even said he knew that was going to happen, because Francis went in there and he took it seriously, and Tyson Fury didn't. That's why that fight was competitive. That's why Tyson Fury didn't look as good as Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua took him serious. He knew what he was going to get when Francis stepped in that ring with him, and Francis just ultimately didn't know what to do. Once he got cracked, once he got dropped, he said, this is something I've never felt before. I've never experienced this power before. Usually no one can strike like me. No one can crack like me. No one can throw that right hand, that left hook like me. But he ran into, one of the best. And Anthony Joshua, he went in there, did his thing. It was a big risk for him as well, because think about it. The guy that you're supposed to face, the scary, one of the best heavyweight champions that we've ever seen in the sport of boxing, Tyson Fury, goes in there and he struggles to beat this guy. And then you're up there next, and if you don't look good in this fight, if you look worse than Tyson Fury, there was a lot of pressure on AJ's back that night, and he showed up and he showed out. He performed on that night, dropping him two times and then ultimately knocking him out the third time. And it wasn't just anybody. It was Francis Ngannou, and to knock him out the way that he did, it was vicious. It was a vicious shot that he landed on Francis. And Francis, say what you guys want, he got knocked out, but he's a champion for even taking risks like that. Who's going into boxing territory? He's making millions of dollars. Don't get me wrong, that's a given. But ultimately, there's so much risk. You know, he ultimately risks his manhood. He risks getting embarrassed on live national television, but he was willing to do it because, you know, why? He's getting money, he's getting, you know, the recognition, and he's daring to be great. And I think that he deserves all the respect in the world for that. And I think, you know, he still has a great career ahead of him in the PFL. And I agree with Anthony Joshua that, you know, Francis Ngannou should continue to box because he's not bad. I think he's a solid fighter. I think he could beat some of the heavyweights today. I still think that Francis and AJ is a money fight, you know, unless I think Francis and Deontay is a money fight. You know, obviously AJ, you know, knocked him out, but I still think AJ, Deontay Wilder, that's a big fight as well. But if you want to give Francis another mega fight where it is risky, of course, you know, you go in the direction with Deontay Wilder, take that route, make millions of dollars. You might get knocked out. You'll probably get knocked out again, but, you know, you don't have a horrible chance because I think AJ's fundamentals are a little bit better. But, you know, Deontay's like the legit definition of it only takes one. You know, you could be having a lot of success if you're Francis, but you know, if you bag 6 rounds and the 7th round he lands one shot, all your progress is taken away from you. But it's just interesting to hear Dana White talk about that he knew that Francis was going to lose. He imagined that. He tries to stop those kinds of fights from happening because ultimately he knows in the back of his mind if a UFC fighter gets in there with a boxer, he's going to lose. And we saw it with Conor McGregor. It's just a different kind of sport. You know, I'm not saying a lot of MMA fighters like to, you know, take the arguments of, you know, you guys aren't going to join MMA, and we're not saying that, you know, MMA is not legit. We're saying, you know, in this sport where it's all about these two, you know, the boxer's gonna come out on top, and that's just how it's been. That's the way it is. And, you know, Tyson Fury obviously, you know, didn't take Francis seriously, and he paid the price for it. He got embarrassed, and now, you know, people aren't taking Tyson seriously, so he has to bounce back from that as well. It's all, you know, you can't cheat the sport. You can't outrun you know, the right way of doing things. You have to do things the right way. You know, you run your training camp the same way you would against preparing for Anthony Joshua, preparing for Deontay Wilder if you're Tyson Fury. And he didn't do that against Francis, and he, you know, ultimately had to pay for it. So Francis Ngannou, you know, taking a big risk going into the boxing world, entering uncharted territory against Tyson Fury, had success, arguably won the fight, going next, you know, going to no slouch. You know, usually guys, if you think about it, guys go into boxing from MMA and maybe, you know, fight a solid opponent, but he went straight for the big dogs, and I think that's why you got to give Francis all the credit in the world. And I'd love to see him continue to work on boxing, to continue you know, to improve, because, you know, who knows, he might become heavyweight champion of the world. You know, nothing's out of the question. He has a good foundation, like I said before. It's just he ran into the wrong guy in Anthony Joshua. He fights a guy like Deontay Wilder, maybe, and most likely runs into the same exact problem, maybe even worse, because, you know, I would argue that Deontay Wilder is an even more devastating puncher than Anthony Joshua. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. Dana White, UFC president, saying that he kind of knew that Francis would lose to Anthony Joshua, and, you know, if Tyson Fury trained properly, he would have had, you know, way more success and would have ultimately beaten Francis Ngannou in that first fight. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. Thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace. That's going to do it for another Naz Fight Media video, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's been your boy, Matt Nabong, with another video. Hope you guys enjoyed it all. Thank you guys for the constant support. Salute to y'all always. It's been your boy.